will be interesting to see, for example, to see what Rishi Sunak does now, because of course he's under great pressure, including by some members of the Conservative Party, to restrict UK military assistance to Israel, which is far less than the American military assistance, but still it would be a significant step. But I think the wider U.S. play here is, and this is what I'm keeping my eye on, Ruth, is they're trying to isolate Benjamin Netanyahu. They're not going all out yet to say there must be a ceasefire. They're not going all out to say there must be aid with no Israeli veto on aid. They are talking to the other two members of the Israeli war cabinet, Benny Gantz and Yoav Gallant, and saying, really, really, do you want to be backing this open-ended war for not just 6 months, but for a year, but for 2 years, given the damage to your reputation? They're hoping that Gallant and Gantz will step up against Netanyahu and that they will limit the Israeli military operations.
The IDF has announced that 2 senior officers have been dismissed over the strike which killed a number of aid workers. The Israeli military said the strike was a grave mistake and they blamed it on misidentification. The response has come after the US President Joe Biden had called for immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Giora Island, who's a retired Major General of the IDF, shared his perspective on the strike.
Yes, it was a combination of mistakes and also violations of some of the rules of engagements by senior officers in the ranks of major and colonel. And the combinations of all these matters actually created this very, very sad results.
Well, I'm joined now by Professor Scott Lucas, who's Professor of American Studies at University College Dublin's Clinton Institute. Professor Lucas, thank you for joining us on the programme.
Thank you for having me here.
I mean, this is obviously a deadly incident. It's caught the imagination around the world, but in some ways it seems to have been a flashpoint for criticism from allies of Israel. To be honest, the tensions that it has exposed look as if they've been quite some time in the making.
Well, it has been, Ruth, for the reason that we're not just talking about this incident where 7 members of the World Central Kitchen were slain. Israel has killed almost 200 aid workers since October 7th in Gaza. More than 175 of those aid workers worked for the UN. Israel, of course, has also killed more than 100 journalists. They've killed hundreds of medical staff. So to simply call this an accident, a tragic accident, and to try to treat it as a one-off, frankly, it doesn't wash. And of course, the reason why Israel has acted in this case and not in the others has been that it has been such a high-profile case, given that these were foreign nationals who worked for the World Central Kitchen, which is quite a well-known organization, and in particular, because of the pressure that then followed, especially from Joe Biden with his message to Benjamin Netanyahu last evening.
Is this, in some ways, quite courageous from Joe Biden? It's an election year. People in America think of themselves as Israel's staunchest ally, but there is a sense often that there is a difference in the levels of support between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party.
I'm not sure you can really call it a politically courageous move. I think I just want to stick with the facts here. And the facts are that in the, what is now 5 months, in fact, 6 months, since Hamas's mass killing inside Israel, and then the Israeli response that has killed more than 32,000 people, the United States, of course, has not only held out against any type of ceasefire, the United States has not only held out against limiting military assistance to Israel, they've increased military assistance to Israel. They've provided some of the weapons that have been used to kill civilians, including aid workers in Israel. So I think Biden simply acted because he had to at this point, that you almost had a tipping point because of the publicity with this case. Whereas to simply sit on your hands yet again, given that the rest of the international community has been so vocal in its denunciation of what Israel's done.
Sorry, can I just stop you there, Scott? Because my understanding was when you say that President Biden has held out, and America, his administration has held out against a ceasefire. My understanding was that in the latest Security Council, actually it didn't hold out. It abstained, which allowed for it to go through and to come out and to publicly call for one and to say that they were calling for an immediate ceasefire, which is very much not what the Netanyahu administration wants. It's quite a big break between these two allies.
It would be, Ruth, if that was exactly what happened. But there are some caveats here. First of course, the United States didn't support the UN Security Council measure for a limited ceasefire. It actually just abstained on the vote, and abstaining on a vote, which did allow it to go through because the U.S. did not cast its veto, is not the same as supporting. Secondly, while that UN resolution is to be welcome, it was, of course, just a ceasefire, which was in the first instance for the period of Ramadan. It's not an unconditional ceasefire. And the U.S. position is that, okay, if there's going to be a ceasefire, it has to be linked to a deal which returns all the hostages from that Hamas are holding, about 130 hostages and bodies, and that you will not have a ceasefire before that condition is met. And we're not close. We are not close to any type of hostages for detainees deal yet. So, I'm not saying that the U.S. has done nothing here. They have edged towards actually saying that Israeli military operations must be limited. And significantly, they actually, I think, have said for the first time, if you do not do something about getting aid into Gaza, we might consider limiting military assistance to you. That is a shift, but it's not a significant shift. It's not a game changer at this point.
It may not be a game changer between US-Israeli relations, but it does certainly give an indication to other countries around the world the way this is moving. Do you think that might free up other allies of both Israel and the US to be a bit more vocal and say some of the things they've perhaps been saying in private rooms but not in public ones?
Well, it will be interesting to see, for example, to see what Rishi Sunak does now, because of course he's under great pressure, including by some members of the Conservative Party, to restrict UK military assistance to Israel, which is far less than the American military assistance, but still it would be a significant step. But I think the wider U.S. play here is, and this is what I'm keeping my eye on, is they're trying to isolate Benjamin Netanyahu. They're not going all out yet to say there must be a ceasefire. They're not going all out to say there must be aid with no Israeli veto on aid. They are talking to the other two members of the Israeli war cabinet, Benny Gantz and Yoav Gallant, and saying, really, really, do you want to be backing this open-ended war for not just 6 months, but for a year, but for 2 years, given the damage to your reputation? They're hoping that Gallant and Gantz will step up against Netanyahu and that they will limit the Israeli military operations. That way, the Americans don't have to take the responsibility in an election year for issuing an ultimatum, and you still get the desired effect from an American point of view that you pull back, for example, from the invasion of the city of Rafah, which has more than 1.3 million Gazans under imminent fear of an Israeli assault.
And of course, I mean, Netanyahu has always portrayed himself as a strongman leader of Israel. He will keep you safe. That famous advert that he's the only person that you would trust to look after your babies when you went out for a night out. I mean, the fact that those 7th of October attacks were mounted on his watch is catastrophic for him. There are a lot of people within Israel who might be natural supporters who are absolutely not supportive of the way in which Benjamin Netanyahu is executing this response.
I think that's right, Ruth. I think because even if I still think most Israelis support military action against Hamas, I think the way that it has been carried out is being seen not as Netanyahu defending Israel, but Netanyahu defending himself. And let's be very frank here, because this is well known in Israel. The moment this war stops, Benjamin Netanyahu's political career is probably over. There will be early elections, and it is unlikely that he can hold on to office. And he'll be in legal jeopardy, because then the trial can resume against him over bribery charges. And remember the backdrop to this, that in a sense, Hamas exploited an opportunity because for months, Netanyahu shredded Israeli society by trying to quash the courts, by trying to prevent them from pursuing that investigation and prosecution of him, to the extent that many people accused him of trying to break the Israeli system. So he carries the can for this. But here's the key question. Does that mean that we are now seeing Israelis that will come out and say, well, look, we think, in fact, the military operations have to be curbed, that it's not just a question of Netanyahu's responsibility? And in the last few days, that possibility has opened up, because some of the families of those who are held hostage by Hamas still have joined the anti-war movement in Israel. I don't think it's enough yet to swing Israel against prosecuting the war, but I think that upsurge in anti-war sentiment is notable and will put more pressure on the war cabinet in the days to come.